Our co-chair, our co-chairs, for those who may not know, our vice chairs are Leonard Jordan and Barbara Zala-Gringer. And so they should be acknowledging themselves in their own special way. Let me just go right through with the agenda. So I've done the welcome. Let's go with the approval of the agenda. Are there any edits to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our November 2021 meeting?
Yes.
Are there any edits or corrections? Okay, great. Should you?
I
Go ahead.
submitted a few minor corrections to the office.
No problem. What I was about to say was, should you have any edits or corrections going forward? If you will follow through as Barbara did and just send them to the office, we'll make note of those in the final documents. Thank you. The next item we have on the agenda would be the chairperson's report. So let me start with a couple of things. One, again, thank you all for your service as chairs and vice chairs for the committees that you serve. And we got through another year. I would say probably not as challenging as 2020, where we had certain periods of the year where we didn't meet, but still a challenging year nonetheless. And I thank you all for your service and your commitment to Community Board 2 and for the constituents that we serve as a voice for in the community. So thank you for that. I also want to mention that we have at different times had people come back and ask, what is the meeting schedule going to be like for 2022? At the current state, we're still in executive order. And so it looks like, at least for a good period of time, we will continue to be in a virtual environment. So until we receive information otherwise, you should probably continue to get used to Zoom and a virtual environment. If we hear differently, we will definitely let everyone know. With regard to that, given the feedback from the most recent audit from the Comptroller's Office, there are several points that were highlighted about the way we do our business. And so, for example, if we have to go back to an in-person environment, given some of the requirements that have been highlighted about having a streaming real-time service that's provided to the community, it may not allow us to go back to what we were accustomed to in the sense that we would move around from location to location with the purpose of allowing community members to take part into the process of what a community board meeting is like if we're limited to just real-time streaming. And so that's something that we still need to review, but just wanted to bring it up as a topic for how we handle that going forward. Additionally, the law department has highlighted in some ways areas that they think the Comptroller's Office audit wasn't appropriate or maybe misinterpreted some items. And I think even several board members have done the same. But one of the areas that they've highlighted is the notion of having public hearings be a requirement of a majority of the full board. Let me say that one more time. One of the things that they've highlighted is that public hearings should be a majority or quorum of the full board. Now, that becomes a little challenging because while the office does a great job of making sure that their notice is sent out and everyone is aware when we have public hearings, we generally do those public hearings at the committee because that's usually where the topic is more appropriate. And that's where you have the colleagues in the community and on the board who generally are the right kind of subject matter experts to be able to speak on those topics. I don't know that on the heels of what I mentioned at the last exec committee meeting about length of meetings and how we can make them a little bit more timely. I don't know that having the general body meetings serve as a location for public hearings is ideal, because at that rate, we probably would have meetings well into midnight. And I don't know that that's anything that anybody signed up for. I'm still mindful that we're volunteers. And while I know we have to adhere to certain aspects of the open meeting law and whatever's actually on the books, I just want us to be mindful and thoughtful about how we handle that, because that could be somewhat of a challenge. I'm not in no way, shape, or form in my comments tonight giving a final determination on what that's going to look like, but I do know that that's something that's been highlighted and brought to our attention. So let me pause there for a minute. I see Sid Meyer has his hand up for a question. So Sid.
Is my set? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can't hear me. No, you can hear me now. Okay. I read that letter, and it said that what the charter requires that the board hold one public hearing a month where the community is to be heard. Now, that's not necessarily that are they saying there has to be a quorum method? I didn't read that to say that, because public hearings don't normally require a quorum.
Well, what they came back with is that their response came back with that you need to have a quorum of the full board for public hearings. That's one. And number two, I don't know that our schedule works in such a way that we have to have, or that we even have topics that require a public hearing once a month. You don't always have topics that require that. So it's a lot of things, a lot of ambiguity in the messaging.
What they're saying is, I understand, but what the chart. I've lost Lenny.
No, you didn't lose me. I just stopped talking because you were going to say something.
No. What I thought, I read the letter, and it said that the board's required to have one public hearing a month. And that
I read it too. And what I'm saying is that's not applicable. I don't know that we have topics that require a public hearing a month. Sometimes we go.
No, I understand that.
So what are you saying, Sydney? I'm sorry.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is they're saying that we have to notice, my read of it, that we have to notice a public hearing for community concerns once a month, irrespective of whether you have, so that the community can come in and say whatever they want to say once a month to the whole board. That the charter requires that you do that once a month, whether you have whether you have specific agenda items or not. The board is still required to hold, because that's what the charter says, one public hearing a month to hear community concerns. It doesn't have to have a specific noticed agenda item other than, public meeting to hold to hear public concerns.
Yeah, so thank you for that. We read it the same way. And what I was about to say before I stopped, so I can let you finish your comments, is that with regard to that aspect of it, I'm not sure that we're not already satisfying that, because once a month when we have our general body meetings, we have an open forum. And in the open forum, in the open period, is where we hear the concerns of the community. So I'm not 100% sure that what they've stated isn't already being addressed. So that's how I was going to conclude my comments. I don't know that we need to do anything different than that, but I bring it to everyone's attention tonight for us to think about it a little bit more. But as I read it, I think we are already accomplishing that.
Except for one thing, they say it has to be done at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, but remember, from my previous discussion, we're already looking at that. And if I remember correctly, you were the first committee to take an attempt at that after further consultation between you, myself, and the office. So we already, it's a good reminder, but we're aware of that, and we're looking to change that process as we speak, as we go into the new year. Again, not that I think that we need to do anything differently than what we're doing today, other than maybe moving some things around in the agenda. but I do get the sense that we are already compliant in that aspect of what was highlighted in the open meeting law.
I just wanted to mention that, there have been any number of public hearings along the way that we've conducted, and there's been nobody there.
And then there's that. That's true too. You're right. But I think, irrespective of that, what the onus is on us to demonstrate is that we give the community a voice to share their concerns, that it should be done earlier in the meeting as opposed to the very end of the meeting, and that we also allow the community to have the opportunity to speak on items that require a vote before we actually vote on it, so that we wouldn't have the vote and then people comment later. And at that point, it's like, kind of, oh, well, we already voted. So it's a mixture of those three things that I think we can do. I'm confident we can do in a way that can be affected immediately in January. It's just that we're still learning more. And I had some concerns about some of the findings from the audit, and Carol Ann was helpful in helping me convey those messages back to the controller's office. So I say all of this as part of the open meeting law context, is that we still may need to make some minor changes, but for the most part, I think we are compliant with the responses from the review. So the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about is, I know
Singletary, I think Ms. Church has her hand up. I don't know if you see that.
I can't see it, but go ahead, Carolyn. Thank you, Brandon. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, I just wanted to reiterate about the public hearing part. The guidance from the law department does say that the charter provisions cited asks that public hearings be conducted by the entire body and not by a subset of its members whose concerns and jurisdictions are limited. So while we are thinking of how we reformat our meetings to comply, we have to keep that in mind. So, my suggestion would be that all board members who are available attend the public hearing, especially in the virtual space. But that's just a thought I have for us to manage that at this point.
Yeah, and listen, thank you for that. That's a point that we definitely want to amplify, but it kind of goes back to my original statement. When we have public hearings, however we choose to do it, whether it be through the general body meetings or if we continue to move through the committees, we send notices out to the entire board, all of the members of the community board and our listserv. So whether individuals participate or not, that's kind of a hard onus to put on the community board from my perspective. You can't, I don't know how you make people participate, how you make people join the meetings. It's one thing if people weren't notified or if no one was aware of the participation that's required. But beyond that, I'm not sure that we, at least at this hour, we have a foolproof method on how to resolve that point. But Caroline, I still want you to remind us of that. I don't think that's something that we should forget, because it is something that was highlighted. And I do want us to adhere to that aspect of it as best as possible. Any other comments or questions on open meeting before I move on to another topic? Okay, great. One of the things that I also want to highlight is we have, not through the fault of anyone, this is really just more a reminder, and I know that each of you as chairs and co-chairs are creative in the way that you engage, but as per the bylaws and I guess the requirement and responsibility of whoever is elected and serves as chairs, the idea of working groups can only be authorized through the chair. And so if there are committee members or if there are chairs and co-chairs who have ideas for working groups or smaller groups that want to meet to address the topic, I ask that you bring it to my attention, because again, that also falls under the open meeting law. So if there is a subset of individuals like we had when I first took over as chair, we had a small subset of individuals to work on looking at the methodology for AMI. Even when you have those small subsets and people want to meet, it still has to adhere to the open meeting law. And so to make sure that we're compliant, if you have ideas for working groups or maybe smaller individuals to serve as ad hoc to work on a particular topic that you think would enhance a particular item that reoccurs in your committee or something that is overall beneficial to the board, just please bring it to my attention and the office, and then let us try to work through what's the right solution so we can, accomplish the spirit and the intent of the working group. The next thing I wanted to mention is the notion of executive session. And so, we have these challenges from time to time, but this is really, again, as a reminder, whenever the committee, any committee, or even a full board for that matter, goes into executive session, you must have a motion to enter into an executive session for a specific item to be discussed, And then it's strongly stated that, for example, when we do finance and personnel issues, because of the nature of those items, that's when we kind of go into an executive session, because there is some level of confidentiality and privacy that you want to respect for the staff and some of the items that need to be discussed. When minutes are not necessarily required when you go into an executive session, unless a vote is taken. If a vote is taken, you must take minutes to be able to reflect what the outcome was and what the topic that was discussed. And then you must entertain a motion to come out of executive session, right? So this is just a reminder, but you need a motion to go into executive session and you need a motion to come out of executive session. And there are no requirements for minutes unless you are taking a vote. So that's, again, just another of a reminder of things that we need to think about as we serve as chair and co-chairs of the board and the respective committees. That's pretty much it for now. There are other things that I probably want to reiterate as we move forward and as we actually get into the new year. But for tonight's session, that's all I have for the chairperson's report. And so before I move on to the next agenda item, let me just pause to see if anybody has any questions. I don't want to rush this along.
Well, I have a question for the chair. It wasn't something that was mentioned in your report. So I don't know if you want me to save it or bring it up now.
The floor is yours. You can bring it up now.
Oh, thanks, Lenny. I was just wondering if there's been any determination about changing the schedule of meetings.
So we've been talking a lot about changing the schedule.
Right.
We noticed that we have one conflict because for one of the meeting schedules, it conflicts with a committee that meets, and we have one board member who actually serves as a vice chair who agreed to serve the community board at the borough president's cabinet meeting. And so that serves as a conflict. And then I'm trying to personally, as the chair, I'm trying to work through a conflict that has just arisen for work that now requires my attention on Thursdays. And if you remember in the proposed schedule, Thursday was going to be the night for our general body meetings. And so right now we have two conflicts that we're trying to work through.
Okay.
And once we work through those conflicts, we will implement, hopefully, the new meeting schedule. But right now, everything's still going to remain the same. We're not going to make any changes just yet. Good
to know. Thanks.
Sure.
Chair Singletary, this is Bill Flournoy.
Hey, Bill.
How you doing, sir? Just out of curiosity, as you know, the Economic Development Committee meets the first Tuesday of the month, which would be the 4th of next week. Do we think we'll have any conclusion or any type of procedure for open meetings by then, or should I just continue to kind of allow things to develop?
My recommendation is that I don't think we're going to have a solid resolution on all the items I mentioned to you today. What I would ask is that for every chair and chairperson to please allow the community to have a forum at the beginning of your respective meetings, And should there be an item that requires a vote, that we set aside some type of process or procedure, which I will leave up to the chairs and co-chairs, that allows the community to speak on a topic, because someone may be coming to a particular issue late, and they may have some feedback that's germane or may help in how the committee votes. And so I wouldn't want that to be left out. So those are the only two things I would recommend or ask that we consider and make those changes to. But as far as having a full resolution, I don't think we'll have it by the time you meet.
So I'll basically give the public, if there's a situation where I feel anyone needs to speak, I'll give them an opportunity.
I'm sorry, I think you broke up a little bit. Say that one more time. I want to be clear.
I'll let the public have an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? Okay, great. Moving on to agenda item number 5, committees for action. We have an action item from the Land Use Committee chaired by Carlton Gordon.
Thank you, Chair Lenny. All right. To say first, thank you to Karen Johnson, who has taken the minutes and who was very busy with both family and personal businesses. And she took the minutes for the items that you are going to be, deliberating on this evening. Also, thanks to our co-chairs, Daughtry Christophin, who's here tonight. Irene Janner is with family, and we wish her well for the holidays. All right. First item coming up is 204 Washington Park, which is in the Fort Greene Historic District. Basically, what the applications were looking for were two things. First was a removal of the facade at the rear, and we're also looking at, especially for the there was a what am I looking for? A bay window. Yeah, excuse me. The second thing that they were looking for was enclosing. There were masonry that was going to be also put up at the rear, which would increase, in size. What happened was that normally, let me just take a little side note, but this is an important side note. These items are not visible from the public thoroughfare. Now, it's been our habit or custom to state that if items that are not visible from the public thoroughfare, we would not need to vote on them because they're not seen by the public. However, the Landmarks Preservation Commission has pushed this particular item on and has pushed several other items on to us. The reason that the Landmarks Preservation Commission has pushed it to us, and according to the presenters of the items, the LPC still wants us to vote on it. They feel that the LPC staff was not able to provide an opinion which would have resolved the matter. They're still looking to us to try to come up with a particular decision. And they felt that the work that's being done, and this particularly in tonight's 4204 Washington Park, they felt that we should be casting at least our opinion on it, and to give the information out. So that's a result. Is after we discussed that matter, we proceeded and we will give you our opinions. So that's just something that has come up. You see it in the description of the application that they're not seeing from the public thoroughfare, but we did vote, we discussed it, and we are going to proceed with it. So as we said, basically there are two sets of things that are being done for the back, the bay window, rear removal area, and also the work at the masonry at the rear. Now, bearing in mind as what Chair Lenny has just talked about, giving, we would say, public opinion, we did open the floor at the start of the meeting for public opinion just to see who we have. And we did get from a local Fort Greene group that was very concerned about the work being done. And they actually came out in opposition to it. Now, the work that we looked at was rather contentious on this particular item. As a matter of fact, we wound up taking 4 votes. That's right, 4 votes on this one. I don't need to go through every single item up, but just to state that basically what we wound up doing, we did approve by a vote. One moment. We did approve the bay windows work by a vote of 8-2 to 2. We felt that the bay windows was very important for preservation of the structure, especially it was a nice stained glass that we wanted to see preserved. And we looked at it and we felt that that was the item that we most felt that should be preserved. So we felt what we did was we split the 2 items, and we said the bay window and the masonry at the back. We did approve that one 8-2. We could not reach a conclusion, however, on the second item, which was the masonry at the rear. And that one came out basically as a tie vote. We could not reach a determination on the work being done at the masonry at the rear. But we did approve the work that was going to be done at the bay window. We felt that should be preserved, and that was our conclusion on that particular item. Now, do you want me to go to the second item, or do you want to discuss the 204 Washington Park?
You can cover both of them, and then we'll
Okay.
ask at your conclusion of your report.
All right, thank you. The second one is 403 Pacific Street, which is in Boerum Hill. And also that one is some weird work on that one as well. It's actually an addition that is being asked on that one. It'll be an addition at the rear, which will provide a roof deck up to the 2nd story. The addition, it'll be 12 feet out, and it will, and yes, basically it will be doing work on brick facing. And we felt that the work on this one was an acceptable one. We liked the work, and we did approve this one 9-1 to 2. So we approved the full application on 403 Pacific. We approved a portion of 204 Washington Park.
Thank you, Carlton.
Okay.
So before we proceed with the committee's recommendation, is there anyone from the public who wish to make any comments or speak on the items that were just presented by the chair of the Land Use Committee?
I see Howard Collins. It was
So let
raised
me-
his hand. I think he's one of the people involved in the Boerum Hill Association, Lenny.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Carlton? I didn't hear you.
Howard Collins. Now, I think that disappeared, but he was just there on the screen.
Yeah, I don't
Now,
see
I
him.
know Howard.
So
Yeah.
if Howard is here, or if he comes back.
He's here.
Okay.
He's here.
Okay, Howard, go ahead. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with the committee's vote. My only point of information is actually for the architect. And just to make everybody aware, the architect showed the historic district. That was the map prior to the historic district extension in 2018. So when referring to Atlantic Avenue, the rear yard of 403 is adjacent to the Atlantic Avenue Historic District, and that is important. The only other footnote to your committee work is rear yard extensions become bigger and bigger topics. It seems that This one, sandwiched between two other existing ones, makes sense. But more and more people want to go further and higher. And the BHA believes that at some point there should be a reinterpretation of the rules so that the greenery is not all replaced by patios. And we keep losing trees and we get shrubs. We get manicured backyards and less greenery. DOB may require a holding tank for water, but the green itself has been very important in this neighborhood, and we appreciate the work that LPC does, but it's not robust enough to prevent the continued chipping away. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Howard. Appreciate those comments. That's helpful.
And
Next,
I'll just add, like, yeah, that's something that we look at very closely. We always like to look at what's called the donut. You know, what these buildings, you know, you have, let's say, the top, let's say Atlantic, Pacific, and then let's say Deanenberg, and just say, you know, on the sides. What we try, not Greenberg, but how we're trying to describe a donut, so to speak, in the middle, as Howard Collins is described. And we do look at those very closely, the extensions, because if we don't want them going too far to take out the greenery, just as he said. And that's something that we have been looking at on each one of these extensions. And also, will they affect the buildings next door? We had a very long presentation from Buildings Department, which is continuing about how it'll affect buildings next door as well. So we're looking at that. We are looking at very closely.
thank you, Carlton.
Now
That's
I
good.
see Daughtry Kostarkin and John
I got
have their
it.
hands up as well.
I got it, Carlton. I got it. So let me take the questions in this order as I saw the hands raised. I'm going.
Yeah.
Mr. Singletary, we lost your audio.
So I'm sorry. We're gonna go with John Dew and then Daughtry in that order, because I saw I'm taking order in which hands were raised. So Mr. Dew, the floor is yours. John, you're on mute.
I'm off mute now. I just want to revisit that issue of the landmarks referring an issue to the community board or community board input. This is a donut. It cannot be visualized by the community. So we made a decision a while back that the community board was not going to deal with issues in the donut that could not be visualized by the general community. We have so many issues that we have to deal with on landmarks and land use. This item took an hour and a half. We did not talk about the homeless population and the committee's role in that. There's so many things that we need to talk about in landmarks and even land use, that the discussion of something that no one can see at a community board meeting just seems ridiculous. The discussion can take place at the landmarks committee meetings, and the community can participate at the landmarks committee. I abstain from all of these votes because I don't think this is fair to our community that we should be spending this amount of time, an hour and a half, on something that we can't see. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Daughtry?
Ms. Karstoffen, your audio, please.
Daughtry, you're muted.
Thank you. Seems like I would figure that out by now. Thank you for the opportunity. Just wanted to provide a little bit more context. I agree with Mr. Dew, by the way. And the second item on the agenda was very quick. I just wanted to be clear that was a one-story addition. It passed very quickly. But for 204 Washington, I think there's a little bit more context that the exec committee might be interested in. This is a 130 some odd year old brownstone that I believe has been empty for 7 years or so. It's a full gut renovation. What the Landmarks Preservation Committee was asking us to consider boiled down to the two sections of the rear facade that Carlton mentioned. One was an extension that would be the same bulk as the existing extension that the architect presented Sanborn maps to show was not original. Part of that extension included the bay window that Carlton mentioned. This kicked up a lot of emotion, I think, partly because a stained glass window was an integral part of the bay window that was assessed to be beyond repair, meaning it's in such bad shape it can't be refurbished. So that was one of the issues on the back facade. The second issue on the back facade was the enlargement of the masonry openings, basically the second floor windows, which typically would be 3 windows in a row that are very standard for these row houses, would be enlarged, and I think to everyone could feel free to say would be modernized. So what Taya is showing now is the bay window and the existing conditions of that bay window and the stained glass. But on the second floor above, there were also 3 standard windows that would be, those openings would be enlarged and modernized to include, yes, so there we go, to include, much larger opening instead of 3 windows, perhaps just 1 larger opening. So the discussion, Mr. Dew is correct, went on for a long time because people felt very impassioned about this. And once we realized that LPC was asking us to vote on these 2 items, we came to take them separately, to vote on them separately. And so it was basically split down the middle. And I think, Mr. Gordon, if you can be a little bit clearer in what was eventually was voted on 822. I think, if I may, I don't have the minutes in front of me, and someone please feel free to read them out. But my recollection is that the proposal was to accept what we're calling the bay window extension, which are the lower floors, with a friendly amendment that would ask the architect to try to incorporate the stained glass window into that extension, right?
That's correct, Audrey. Yeah. I tried to throw not throw, but did bring up the stained glass because I think that was the most important thing, that aspect that I think that the committee wanted to protect, that stained glass window. And we did, and that's the reason why we did go 822, because I think there was a sense of, let's protect that this is a valuable piece of historic, of the historic, I would say, property of the building. So we wanted to keep that. So yes, and I think we did accept that, the bay window, because we wanted to see that the stained glass and that whole area be protected. That's why we voted 822.
Right, and just to finish that, Taya so graciously posted it. 822 vote was, quote, to approve the renovation of the rear facade first floor bay window and incorporate new stained glass in the design.
Yes.
And then, just to be super clear, the second vote, Mr. Gordon, to be honest, I don't recall, if you might recall, but we took these 2 votes separately after multiple
Correct, yeah.
attempts. So can you, or Taya, if you have the minutes in front of you, could you read what the second vote was on and what the vote was?
Well, the second, okay, after we split,
I'm sorry,
split the application. Yeah, what we did is we split, Mhm.
Time out. I'm sorry. Just
We
so I'm
split the
clear,
application.
Just-
Okay,
just so I'm clear, 204 Washington. Does your
yes.
action court require us to respond to 3 different votes? Like, I'm not clear. What are you asking?
The only thing that's, I guess, would be required is that we approve the bay window, the rear bay window stained glass. That was the one that we did approve 822. We could not come to a conclusion on the bulk of, the work the rest of the work that's being done at the rear. that's the one we could not come to any conclusion on that.
Right, so
And
since
that's where it was.
the conclusion, unless I'm misinterpreting this, there's no action for us to take, correct?
In the second part, that's correct.
Okay,
Just
so,
the only action that we're asking for is on the stained glass window.
okay, so I don't know that we need to have any
On the
more,
bay window stained glass, yes, excuse me.
yeah, so I don't know if we need any more detail on something we're not gonna vote on. All right, so then let me move on to Ms. Blunt. She had a question.
I didn't realize you wasn't taking a vote on this, but,
Well, no, I'm not, we're not taking a vote on 204 Washington.
okay.
What I'm
But-
trying to get clarity on is that there were multiple votes that were taken place. Mr.
Yeah.
Gordon indicated there were things that the committee could not agree upon. And so therefore, what the committee could not agree upon is not being recommended to us. There's no need to vote on that. That's all I'm trying to be clear on.
Okay. The other thing is, Mr. Dew is saying that, if it's in the rear, we shouldn't even be, addressing it. And I wish we didn't have to, but if LPC is saying that they have to come before the community board, then they have to come before the community board, and we do have to look at this. The other thing is, and I brought it up in a meeting, I just say, we split this proposal, that was one proposal, into two separate units without a vote. And we broke up the proposal into about the stained glass window and the other thing, and it got so confusing at the end. I've been thinking about it since the last meeting, and I'm on land use. It's like I didn't even know what I voted on. So I just want to, I'm not trying to start something. I just want to know if this happens again, if a developer comes with one proposal, can we can make a friendly amendment, but should we have broken it up into two separate items without a vote?
Well, so
We can have,
without having a parliamentarian here, what I would say is I don't know that it's the committee's purview to break up a proposal. I think you vote on what's presented before you. And if what's presented before you requires you to have some caveats. And so, give an example of what we've done in the past and it's still applicable, vote yes or no with conditions. I don't know that it is appropriate because you're now creating more applications than what was brought before the committee. I don't know if the committee, for example, if there were 4 applications, let's say, brought before the committee. There weren't. There was just one. And so I think that's when you make votes with conditions, but I don't know that you pull them apart. Again, without having a parliamentarian here, that would be my take on it as the chair.
normally we don't pull apart an application. It was this particular one had just caused so much contention that we felt that we had to split them in order to get some kind of resolution. So we did, I think we did have a good resolution on the bay windows, the stained glass. And that's what we're proposing for tonight before the executive committee. And we hope to get your support on that. The other one, we just could not come to any conclusion on. I think it was an unusual situation.
But what I'll say to that is, I don't know that I agree with the statement of we had to, right? I think that's where you make conditions. That's where you vote with conditions. I don't know that you, because again, the applicant then comes to you with 4 different proposals. They came to you with one. And so, maybe it's semantics, but I don't know if I can fully wrap my head around the whole notion of committee had to. I get that it may have been a passionate conversation. I get that, absent of being in the meeting, that there may have been points of contention. But if what was presented to you was one application, then you take a vote on one application. And if you have to have conditions, you have conditions.
Mr. Singletary?
Yes, Mr. Flournoy.
Okay, being that I'm the person who actually made the motion, we didn't have to separate it. I made a motion to separate, and I broke the motion up into 2 parts, and it was seconded by the group. Okay, so So I made one motion to accept the stained glass renovations of that, made that motion. That motion was seconded. It didn't have to be seconded. If no one seconded it, we wouldn't have done it. And then we took a vote on it.
Let me say this, my comments are not to make, and let me just put this caveat here. I'm not saying anyone should feel. I just want to clarify my comments. My comments are not to make anyone feel that they did something inappropriate, because I'm sure, as all committees do, you work to try to do the best thing with the intent and information that you have. You are absolutely right. If no one seconded the motion, then you probably wouldn't have got what we have tonight. All I'm saying is, if you take a step back, what was presented before the committee was one application, right? Not two, not three, not four, one. And so what I'm suggesting is maybe this is a learning opportunity, or just, a chance to reconsider things, is that should this happen again, I don't think it's inappropriate, and maybe the committee, or any committee for that matter, should think about supporting or rejecting with conditions, or having additional caveats. We've done that in the past. There's nothing that prohibits us from doing that going forward. That's all I'm suggesting. Because the same level of long conversation that took place in the meeting, I could see why we're spending so much time discussing it right now. Because, you start to complicate a process that is already complicated. But I understand the intent was trying to move the process along and do the right thing. I get that. And I'm not trying to chastise anybody for doing that. I'm just thinking about other ways that you can present it so that A, it's not confusing to us, B, it's not confusing to the general body, and more importantly, it's not confusing to the community when we actually make a determination on what we're voting on. All right. So with that, I want to take these. I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, I was just going to make a motion to accept the committee's recommendation, Mr. Singletary.
Second.
Is that on both applications?
On both, yeah, the entire, whatever the entire recommendation on both, yes.
All right, so can we clarify, the recommendation on 204 is just about the stained glass window, a recommendation that be included?
Yes, that's the bay window with the stained glass and the stained glass, which is part of the bay window.
Mr. Gordon, may I just clarify? I just think it's important.
Yeah.
That
Go ahead, Daughtry. Yeah.
The architect is proposing to rebuild the rear extension. So it's all going to be all new. It is not different in bulk from what's there currently, but it is all going to be new. And as you saw the rendering, it is going to look different than what is currently there and beyond repair. The addition to the proposal is to ask the architect, we are going to ask the architect to try to incorporate the stained glass window into that new addition. That's all.
And just to clarify, whatever is reflected in the recommendation for the committee, the details are not necessarily relevant right now. That's what we're voting on.
Yes.
Mr. Singletary, you're on mute in case you're speaking, but we do have a motion and a second.
Yeah, I don't know what's on my phone. This is a challenge that I'm having tonight. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Anyone who is abstaining, please raise your hand or say aye. Is there anyone who is opposed to the motion? Please raise your hand or say aye. The motion carries.
Thank you. Oh,
Thank you.
by the way, okay. Oh, and by the way, just to finish up, just let Lenny, will you know about this? West Side Story is now is available, and it was filmed in our district, as Lenny well knows. Well, parts of it was, so you may want to go see it, filmed over partially at the Steiner Studios. It's a part of a CB2 production, so to speak.
We definitely don't see any residuals from that production, but thank
Yeah, we don't, yeah. We didn't get to go in it, Lenny, sorry.
you didn't. Thank you for that, Carlton. And thank you to the committee for the work that you do, even on the very complicated items that you have come before you from time to time.
All right, we do our best. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next agenda item is committees to report. We'll start with economic development and employment. Mr. Bill Flanoy.
Thank you, Chair Singletary. Bill Flanoy, Chair of the Economic Development and Employment Committee. My co-chair, Denise Peterson, is currently not available. We had a meeting I mentioned at the full board meeting, but I'll also mention it again, of the New York City Independent Department of Budget Office. And I think it was a meeting that I felt very confident that every chair and co-chair should check into, because it had to do with the statement of district needs. And I think that's something important that we also review. And it's currently on video on the YouTube. So it's something as a resource that we should always tap back into. Currently right now, over the next week, I'm going to be talking to committee members and basically asking suggestions for what we should look at for the following year, and basically then give that to the board office as our wish list for presentations. The next meeting for the economic development meeting is Tuesday, January 4th, 6 p.m. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Bill. Next committee to report is Finance and Personnel, Mr. Leonard Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Singletary. Well, Mr. Singletary, we have not met since our last meeting on November the 18th, which I did report at our last general meeting, I believe. We will be having our next scheduled meeting is in February. However, we will be having a meeting in January, which I'll be able to report more about the applications and the resumes that we received or we are receiving, and what the committee is going to do about interviews and all of that. So I'll be able to report about that in January. I have nothing more to report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Next committee to report, Health and
Mr. Singletary, may I just ask a quick question of Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Would you mind just dropping the link to the application in the chat?
It's in the chat.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Taya and everyone. Okay, continue.
Okay.
Next committee to report is Health, Environment, and Social Services, Mr. Brandon Smith.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brandon Smith, Chair of Health, Environment, and Social Services. Honored to be joined here by my co-chair, Nicole McKnight, and our secretary, Jessica Thurston. We have had a really wonderful meeting back at the beginning of December. Just to briefly go over the things that we discussed, there was a presentation by one of our public members, Mr. Barry Newmark, about COVID-19. And just so you know, at our committee, our public member, Barry Newmark, does his own research. He's not a doctor, but he does his own research into COVID-19 and just gives us an update on a monthly basis about the statistics. We had a bit of a discussion about trying to have more granular health data, and anyone who's interested in that subject might be interested to know that at our next committee meeting on January the 5th, we're going to be having the New York City Department of Health credit the board office for getting the Department of Health to come to this meeting at this really difficult time for all of us to talk about getting more granular data, particularly in the Fort Greene and 11205 area, and to also talk about how the Omicron variant is being discussed. In the rest of the meeting, we had a really nice discussion led by Mervyn DaCosta and Shalay Baker of New York City Health and Hospitals Gotham Health Cumberland. This is a community health clinic that's located at 100 North Portland Avenue between Park and Myrtle Avenue. They basically talked about the range of services that they provide there, and it ranges from dental care to child obesity classes to vaccine booster shots for COVID-19. We learned some things from them about what folks who are hesitant about taking the vaccine are telling them, which we're going to try to talk to the Department of Health about next month. And we also confirmed that they don't turn away anybody due to income or immigration status. we had a lot more to discuss. It's in the minutes, it's on YouTube. We also had a one liquor license, which was approved. They had no outdoor seating, and we discussed it at the general board meeting. We discussed how to better craft the district needs statement as a committee, and some folks on the committee had some really thoughtful ideas. We've been talking about doing a health fair in the future, but we still need to have a few more meetings for this to materialize, I think. And we got an update on the 275 Park Comedy Club, where the applicant and some community members briefly discussed the results of an information session that we had a few months before. That's pretty much what we discussed at the meeting, but I encourage everybody to come out to January 5th, our next meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon. Next committee to report, Park Recreation, Barbara Zoller-Gringer.
Thank you, Mr. Singletary. Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Singletary said, I'm Barbara Zoller-Gringer, the co-chair of the committee, and my co-chair, Andrew Lastowecki, is also here this evening. Thanks, Andrew, for being here. We did not have a meeting this month. We are going to be meeting again on January 10th. So I hope everybody comes out to that meeting. And what I did want to report is that Emily Roebling Plaza is now open. I went over there last week, and you may remember that they presented to the Parks Committee when they were designing it. And right now it is a large open space with beautiful pavers, a limited amount of number of benches, and very good signage about Emily Roebling. And at the time this project was presented to us, we were told that it would have the infrastructure to support an ice skating rink, which hopefully at some point in time in the not too distant future, once my broken toe heals, they will have an ice skating rink there. So I want to wish everyone a joyous and safe new year, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next committee to report, Transportation and Public Safety, Mr. Sidney Meyer.
Mr. Meyer, your audio, please.
How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I don't have a co-chair to at this point. I do have John Quint, who takes the minutes, and I thank him for his effort. I do wish everyone a happy Kwanzaa and a happy New Year, and a Merry Christmas, of course. We had a really interesting meeting where we had two presentations made to us. One presentation was on I'm trying to open it. Just hold for a second. On the what's called the Brooklyn Downtown Public Realm Vision Plan. And the presentation was made to us, and it was really interesting. At this point, there was no request for a vote, but they did say that they're going to propose extending the bike lane that comes off the Brooklyn Bridge that now ends at Johnson Street, I believe it is. And it's going to be, they're going to try to extend it further. They also discussed making the public realm vision plan much more robust, that it would be more of a mall, both on Livingston and on Fulton Streets. But at the present time, they were not asking for any specific vote. They have in the past come before us, and we have voted to allow some street changes to make it safer and to be more accommodating to both bikers and pedestrians by extending the sidewalks, adding tree pits to help the water runoff, and to do other changes. But at this meeting, we asked specifically, are they planning to close any of the streets? And the answer was no. They would remain open but modified. I'm not so sure whether that's going to continue that way. If the bike lane is extended and the parking that's currently used in the safety zones is removed, those cars, which are generally permit parkers, are going to go someplace else. And that is a continuing problem with the neighborhood. The city is supposed to implement some changes in the permit to allow them to scan the permits to make sure they're invalid. But as you know, that these are self-enforcement zones and the police have not been enforcing it particularly well. There were a lot of questions from the community. There were a lot of questions from the board member, but there, as I said, that there was no vote to be taken. So they will come back to us when there is a vote needed. The next thing was the community had requested a meeting with us to discuss the community's vision for the plaza at Vanderbilt and Gates Plaza. This was to be renamed in Applene's Garden Plaza in honor of the poor young lady who was tragically killed at that corner, and that we had a lively discussion from people on both sides. We implemented first a 2-minute discussion rule after the presentation was made, and we had to reduce it to a minute, minute and a half. The board received a significant number of written comments about this, both for and against. I'm not sure which all the comments are available to board members on the board website, and I had a running tally of them, but we've received some more, and I don't believe the tally is complete. But for the most part, they tend to be in favor of the community vision. But again, no, we asked whether or not they were asking for approval, and they said no. Now, the Department of Transportation has a program where people can come in and adopt this triangle, and that's what they're proceeding under. But the DOT has not come to us yet, and the DOT heard at this meeting. There was another meeting that run by the council member for the council member, and the Department of Transportation has taken all the comments, and they will, when they're ready to ask for our approval, they will do so. We're having, in my view, a continuing problem with the Department of Transportation. And it's something that goes forward. When the open streets and open restaurants programs were announced, I don't believe that sufficient time or effort was made for the community to respond. I think, in fact, I attended one of the recent meetings, and it was clear to me that the people who the Department of Transportation has put in do not believe that, may or may not believe, let me not be editorialized too much, may or may not believe that the community boards provide a robust enough comment group for them to take seriously, frankly. And it's a continuing problem we're having with DOT. It's something that I'm not happy about. And at some point, we may have to come back to the board and ask the board to do something about it. Our meeting will be this month, next month in January. We've asked, and I'm not sure yet what the agenda is. We've asked both the MTA to come to speak to us on ADA, on some of the ADA issues. We're going to probably ask the DOT to do the same, and we're also going to ask to have further discussions with them about open streets and the open restaurant program, both of which are going to be transferred to DOT, but DOT has not issued any regulations yet. And while the building section of the open restaurants will remain under the buildings department, the permitting and a lot of the other issues are going to become under DOT.
Thank you, Sydney. Appreciate that report. Next committee to report, Youth Education and Cultural Affairs. Ms. Betty Fife.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Singletary. I'm Betty Freibush. My co-chair is Dorothea Thompson Manning. We had a very interesting meeting in December. We spoke briefly with the superintendent of District 13 about plans, including the International Baccalaureate program, which will be starting in some of our schools, including the timetable for new schools, including a discussion about health, attendance, and also the culturals. He's very interested in working with us in linking some of our cultural organizations with the schools. So that's something we hope to move forward on, so that the superintendent, the principals, the leadership in the district can be aware of the rich array of cultural organizations and how they can connect with the young people in our community. And then we went into an executive session, which we did. I think we made our motions and so on. And the purpose of the executive session was to review the applications of students for our youth council that we're very excited about. So we have 4 young people that are coming on as they'll be members of the youth council, kind of connected to our committee. And as part of their work, you'll meet them in some of your meetings, because they'll be required as part of this to attend a committee meeting as well as full meetings. We hope that some of them will learn so much and enjoy this experience so much that in the future they will apply to be, appointed members on the board. But this is a 6-month appointment, and they will present in June something that kind of speaks to them, where they have researched, where they hopefully have gone to the relevant committee, and they will give a capstone presentation to advocate for a request that we generally include requests in the statement of district needs, so that they will further our work as well as their own learning. On January 11th, they will meet for a brief meeting to get oriented to the board, the structure, the expectations, and so on. And then hopefully you'll see them in the full meeting and in some of your committee meetings. So we're excited about that. Yeah, so have a safe and happy New Year, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
Can I ask, if you're not speaking, would you please go on mute? And then I noticed that Mr. Dew had his hand up for a question. Didn't want to omit Mr. Dew. So Mr. Dew, you have a question?
I had a number of questions. My first question was for Mr. Jordan. In terms of the community board's budgets, do all community boards have the same budget? And if so, is there an explanation of what happened with the funds that the community board was allocated for the district manager position that hasn't been filled for a year? That's one question. You could take it however. I'm not expecting you to answer that tonight. The other issue I had.
Actually, wait, John, before you move on, let me answer the question. So the community boards start out with a basic budget that's equal amongst all the community boards. Then there are different allocations, the way the boards manage the money, the way money rolls over from year to year, that as those things take place, what each community board has could differ, right? With the different things that come from allocations. From example, council members. There are council members who will make allocations to particular budgets, not to imply that all council members do. So things like that do change the end of year balance of the respective community boards. As it relates to the position for the district manager, when the previous district manager retired, there was a budget line item for that salary. During the height of the pandemic, the mayor required all community boards and all agencies for that matter to give back some level of funding because of the shortage and the challenge that the city had. And so for the community board, what we decided to do with the advice and counsel of Borough Hall and DCAS was pull back from the salary at the time of the district manager to help eliminate some of the other areas that they wanted to cut. And so therefore, the open position for the district manager is a little bit less than what the ending position was. However, when we get through these cuts and we now go back into a new fiscal year, there's an opportunity to perhaps restore those funds that have been taken as part of the current administration to reduce some of the shortfall caused by the pandemic.
So with that explanation, does that mean that the board office would then be fully staffed? Because right now, I have to admit that board office functions very efficiently with Carol Ann and Taya. However, there's so much more that needs to be done that cannot be done because there isn't the staffing to do it.
So, as I've said before, and I definitely know as the Finance Personnel Committee, it is our intent and has always been our goal. It has taken a while to get there, but it's our goal to make sure that in the first quarter of 2022, calendar year first quarter 2022, that the office is fully staffed with 4 individuals, 3 full-time, including a district manager, and a part-time role.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
I want to pick up on something that Mr. Flanoy said earlier. He said that he's developing a list of items to present to the board that hopefully could be added to the committee's agenda for more in-depth discussion. As a result of the last Landmarks and Land Use Committee meeting, I was just so frustrated that we are not talking about the homeless population. That Community Board 2 was the first community board to be upzoned to create what I'm going to say is part of what contributes to our current the largest homeless population this city has ever sustained. We're always talking about it, but not in a programmatic way. We acknowledge it, but we don't talk about what has caused it. The downtown Brooklyn area was all a low-income community of color. You wouldn't know that today. What happened to all those folk that were forced out of downtown Brooklyn? We talk about the fact that the homeless population is large. We don't talk about city's policies that helped us to get there. It started largely in Community Board 2 in 2004. I think that should be an agenda item. And we should actually invite the City Planning Commission to come and understand what happened in downtown Brooklyn that is now going throughout the city unabated. And the homeless population is unabated. We need to be much more proactive in communicating with the City Planning Commission about the policies that they've put in place that have created this homeless population.
Mr. Du, I was discussing items to be presented to my committee, not to the board,
Yes, but
that deal with economic development and unemployment.
I'm talking generically about having items put on the agenda for the community to come and talk about at the committee meetings.
John, your point is well taken. I definitely got that. So it's well pointed, duly noted.
I'm going to stop there because I can go on all night.
Yeah,
stop.
I did hear you say that. So let me move on to agenda item number 7. For committee
Mr. Singletary, we lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. You have to excuse me. I'm trying to relax and take this meeting. So it's my normal setup is. So that being said, I wanted to come to talk about the posting of the positions for district manager. So that position, it took us a while to get there, but as I mentioned in our last general body meeting, that I knew the position was going to be approved soon, and it has been approved. It has been posted on the community board website, and it has also, with the help of Borough Hall, been posted amongst the listserv for city agencies. And so we have started to receive a few applications. We are also in the process of, and that will be posted soon as well, the part-time position that was once held by Gustavo. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it is the intent of the Finance and Personnel Committee, led by Mr. Jordan, that we get a full complement of staff in the office in the first quarter. That has finally been approved and moving well. And so I want to definitely take the time to thank Borough Hall for their support in helping to get this done. And we are moving on the way. Should you have anybody who was approached you, because I know the position has been up for a while, but now that it's officially posted, should anybody that you know has any interest, please direct them to the community board website and they can apply, and then they will be, their resumes will be reviewed by the committee, and then they will be identified to move to the next phase of the process. So that's what I wanted to mention under other committee business. Is there any other committee business from committee members for this evening? Hearing none, seeing none, let me move on to agenda item number 8, community forum. This is where members of the community, should you have any items that you want us to address or bring to our attention, this is where you have an opportunity to do so. I will remind you or indicate to some who maybe not participated in this aspect before, that if you could keep your comments or questions to 2 minutes, it is greatly appreciated, and the floor is open.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Gail Smith, and my question is, okay, this is my first time, so I'm getting a little nervous, and I know I shouldn't.
Take your time. You're amongst friends. Take your time.
Okay. So I would like to know if the proposed dog run located in the vicinity of Abolition Place has been rejected.
So your timing and your question is a good one. Last Thursday, I think it was last Wednesday, we had a meeting, we being community board, so myself, many of our respective chairs of the committees, particularly land use, youth education, economic development, along with Councilmember Steve Levin, Assemblywoman Joanne Simon, representatives from the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, and from the Economic Development Corporation for the city. We had a discussion last week about the particular topic, and we highlighted and emphasized to EDC that a dog run over a sacred location just doesn't seem appropriate. While we understand that this is something that has been under discussion, EDC has taken the lead on this, we were really clear that we as a community board didn't feel like having a dog run over a sacred area is appropriate. I would also add that it is always helpful to have subject matter experts take part in the conversation. And as was mentioned earlier, one of our vice chairs for land use happens to be an architect. And so in the conversation, Ms. Krishoffin was able to highlight some additional points that wanted to be called out to make sure that whatever's designed for this place, as we now referring to it as Abolition's Place, is respectful and within the context, I should say, of what the park is supposed to represent, highlight, and amplify. What EDC came back with is a little bit of a statement along the lines that there will be no further construction done in the proposed area of where the dog run is supposed to be placed until DCAS continues their evaluation. So that's another city agency. And we are still continuing to have conversations. Clearly, Councilmember Levin has finished his term, and we are now engaging with Councilmember-elect Lincoln Ressler, who will also provide some context and chime in with that conversation as well. So it's an ongoing discussion, but it is one that we as an entire board is passionate about, and we want to make sure that it's respectful in the way that it's presented.
Okay, well, thank you so much for all that information.
You're welcome. The next, I see a couple of hands up. I'm going to go with, I see it looks like, yeah, you just went off mute. Could you identify yourself, please?
Good evening. My name is Linda Hall LaSalle. And hi, this is the first time I'm joining the meeting, and I have a concern about the way the planning has been going with the confusion with plazas, bikes, cars, closing of streets and things of that sort. And I was wondering, is it appropriate to bring those matters to the Transportation and Public Safety Committee or to the Executive Committee?
Well, those items should be addressed in the Transportation Public Safety Committee. But I will say this though too. I think suffice it to say that, as was highlighted with the report from the chair for that committee, we have had some concerns with the way communication and things have been implemented through DOT. So for example, now that I recognize the voice, if you look at Willoughby Avenue and you look at the way that the streets have been closed off, plants are put in the middle of the street, for many people who live in that corridor between Washington Park and, let's say, Hall Street along Willoughby, many people have been surprised that that type of construct has been erected and put in place. What DOT will tell you is that they put up notices and a survey was done and people were supportive of that. It's one thing to do an action and say that you check the box. It's another thing to be proactive and engaging to make sure that the community is heard and that there's appropriate feedback. I'm not sure in this context, as an example, the latter was done. And so it is one of the things that we as a community board continue to have challenges with for that particular city agency. I don't want to come out and make statements like the city agency, because it's not something that we agree with, means that they're wrong. And this isn't about a right or wrong. What I'm highlighting is an opportunity to have a true engagement and feedback from the community before you make a decision that impacts the entire community.
Lenny, I agree with you. And when I checked into that, I called the Commissioner of Transportation's office. And actually, when a lot of this started off and approved, it was approved directly from the mayor's office. It wasn't with DOT, so they didn't even have input at that time. So I think going forward, so we can be a little bit better organized for the entire community, I would like to be involved, and I would like to work with the community board to do that.
So the community board, our colleagues, Carol Ann and Taya, will give you the information in the chat. Feel free to reach out to the board office. We will also make sure that you're part of the listserv so that you know when the Transportation Committee is meeting.
Lenny, you're muted again.
All right, so I'm gonna give you the short version. The short version is contact Carol Ann and Taya. We will make sure you're part of the listserv, and we appreciate your willingness to want to participate and be involved in the community.
Thank you. I think I have a lot of city experience. I'll be of little value.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next hand I see is Howard Collins.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to ask about the shelter siting at 1 Hoyt. I know that it's not actually subject to community board review, but I'm wondering if the community board will make a statement. Certainly, I'm not comfortable with the lack of a public process that lets us ask questions. I've been in contact with Council Member-elect Lincoln Ressler and urging him to get the Community Advisory Board established in early January so we can have discussions and meet the provider. I'm also urging all of us to welcome the shelter and do our best to be supportive. On the other hand, reading the Fair Share document, having lived through the 80 Flatbush ULURP and 660 pages of an EIS that identifies, my favorite phrase, unmitigated adverse effects. That's a very loaded statement. Homeless shelter, which is sorely needed to address a very severe problem, certainly brings out all the emotions that people have. The experience of downtown residents with Duffield Street last summer didn't help this conversation. So again, it's one long question. There's a lot of issues. It's vital that we get in front of it. And I'm wondering if the community board will at least make some statement to sort of get the public in the room or get members of the community board in on the CAB, whatever else can be done to inform the public and make this workable. And I'm mentioning in passing, after we have one Hoyt, we'll have 316 Atlantic, which seems like a lot of residents between the two locations that are pretty close together. So please let me know what you're thinking.
So first of all, let me take a step back and say that, you know, what you've said, the way you phrased the very long question, to use your words, was well said.
Mr. Singletary, or your audio?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Community Board 2 has felt the same way about the way the city has engaged the process to provide resources for the homeless community that exists within our district. It is important to make sure that the community is inclusive to all, and to make sure that the residents who require assistance like a shelter get the resources that they need. We have, and I personally have engaged with Lincoln Ressler to figure out how we have a process that is more inclusive, so that the community does have a say. As you all know, we did take the approach of having a public meeting. It was voluntary, and I think Brandon Smith and his team did an outstanding job of leading that discussion. And while you felt the passion that existed, I think it really kind of stemmed from not being transparent and making sure that people were engaged properly. We, just today, I was having a conversation with our assistant district manager as I began to read the Fair Share analysis to figure out how we can come up with a better solution here. I'm not sure that at this moment I can commit that we will have a statement per se, but we are working closely with Lincoln Ressler and, quite frankly, any other council members who would like to engage to help us find out the right solution, so that, you know, it is not something that is necessarily forced upon the community, but is done in a way that is recognizing the resources that are needed in a more collaborative way.
Thank you. I wanted to mention one thing that's not in the Fair Share that is sort of outside that document, but COVID obviously raging through the city and certainly raging through the jail system and through the homeless population that are in some of the shelters. That needs to be part of the discussion in the ramp up of this facility, which could open in March or April. So just please store that comment as well.
Well, you're right. And I think I don't want to just limit it to just COVID. I think healthcare in general is needed for that community, because they are sometimes or oftentimes forgotten when it comes to healthcare. And so we want to do the right thing by them and hope that whoever's been identified as a partner will do the same thing in the same spirit. So thank you, Howard. I appreciate all those comments. That's very helpful. Before I go back to a usual suspect, are there any other hands I see of individuals who've not already spoken from the community? All right, seeing none, Mr. Dew.
Thank you, Chair Singletary. The issue that I'm going to bring up again, although I'm not sure I discussed it at an executive committee meeting, is that for all of the buildings that have been erected, and I think we're at 60 skyscrapers in downtown Brooklyn and vicinity alone, we don't have an overall traffic plan. We just heard about all of these changes that are happening with the BQE, and they're going to put in all of these different, they're talking about the congestion pricing, they're going to limit the trucks. All of these items are coming out as individual items. Where is the overall traffic plan for downtown Brooklyn? I don't know how all these 100 high rises are supposed to be accommodated for Ubers and Amazon, you know, all of the people getting these deliveries. How is all of that supposed to work downtown Brooklyn? When is DOT and the city going to come together and put an overall plan together, which you can make modifications, but we're starting dealing with every issue individually. We're not looking at the big picture. So I just wanted to put that out there. Parking keeps being removed and we keep adding large residential developments, and they don't sign a waiver that says they're not going to buy a car. So we don't know what's supposed to happen with all this additional traffic and other issues related to development. We need an overall understanding. Everybody's got to be on the same page. Thank you.
Again, those are comments that are well mentioned, and I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that with the fact that the former borough president is now the mayor-elect, that maybe we can get some traction and get better collaboration for some of these issues and take place within community board too. So thank you for those comments. I do not see any additional hands. Oh, Mr. Andrew Lastawecki.
I just wanted to mention something, and this is not to be sounding like I'm having issues with homeless shelters or the need to provide housing for people that are homeless right now in our district. But I just wanted to kind of lay it out there for the board to kind of keep an eye on it. The Tillery Hotel has stopped taking any guests into the hotel. And I heard from people it's because they want to turn that into a homeless shelter or some form of housing that we possibly might not be prepared for. The other one is a building that has been renovated the last 3 years in Fort Greene or Clinton Hill on Vanderbilt and DeKalb. It's two buildings lumped together, 4 stories. Used to be a funeral parlor there. It's empty, and I understand from neighbors that the gentleman that owns the property is looking to make money to turn it into a homeless shelter. We once upon a time said, you know, we don't want to be surprised to get all sorts of homeless shelter provisions in our district. And I think this is kind of happening quietly under the radar. Thank you.
Andrew, that, you know, unfortunately, the Tillery Hotel and the structure you mentioned on Vanderbilt and DeKalb are private. And so those private developers do have the right. Those private developers do have the right to engage in conversations that we may not be aware of. But to my knowledge, this is the first I'm hearing of the intent to wanting to be some type of community resource. Generally what, in my conversations with the owners of the Tillery Hotel, they were looking to find a way to maximize their revenue and potentially in the context of residential as opposed to a hotel. So this is news to me about a homeless shelter. And as far as Vanderbilt and DeKalb, that's news to me. I've never heard that prior to now, but to the extent that we can keep up on it and be abreast of those developments, we'll bring it back to the board and at least try to have a conversation about it.
Thank you.
Sure. One more time, I'm looking to see if I see any other hands maybe I've missed this evening. And I do not. So who wants to be the person to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved, Mr. Singletary.
Always in count, Jordan. I don't need any discussion on the motion. Good night, everyone. Be safe.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy
See
New Year.
everyone.
See you guys next year.